Good morning, guys, and welcome to another week of learning from home. This is coming up to one of your last weeks of doing this. It was really nice to see some of you in class last week. It's this week for me because I'm recording this on Friday. I hope you all found the in-class task quite fun. I'm actually talking about the math task. That's the only one I've done so far with the class, and I thought it's so much fun. I really wanted to have a go. And make sure you enter your design for your housing area into the competition, see if you win. Obviously, that's the same with the writing task as well, because I think there's £10 up for grabs for each year group. Anyway, we are back to what we've been working on for the last month or so. We have just left off the story where Agamemnon's managed to recruit Odysseus and Achilles, and they've all, including a huge army, have reached the sea. And they need to cross the sea to get to Troy. They need to get to Troy because they need to get Helen back to Menelaus because she's been stolen. As well as that, we talked about it. It's also because Agamemnon is going to really want to take Troy because it will make him king of even more land. So it's very beneficial for him. So he's really, really keen to get there. That's where we've left off. I'm just going to keep on telling the story and then take you through what work is going to be. So the huge army arrives at a place called Aulis, which is just a Greek port. And when they get there, they all kind of settle in. They need to get everything set up, probably packing up the boats, doing the last minute, did you pack enough socks kind of thing. And while they're there, Agamemnon decides to go and grab some dinner for himself and his other kind of generals. So he heads out with his bow and arrow, and he manages to shoot a lovely deer, and they all have venison for dinner. This is great. It's very, very tasty. And the next day, when they're all ready to go, the ship's all packed up, the wind just isn't going in the right direction. It's basically blowing inland, so they can't, if they try and head out, it will just, as soon as they put the sails up, it'll just get pushed right back into shore again. And they try a few times, and they try day after day, and nothing will work. And they're getting more and more and more angry. So when this kind of thing happens in ancient Greek times, the best thing to do is go and ask somebody who's called a seer. Okay, it was almost like a job in itself. And they're somebody who has a kind of partial connection to the gods. So they might be able to pray to them or get some kind of message from them or interpret signs usually from the gods. And Agamemnon went to this seer and he said, what's going on? Why am I not able to cross? Because everyone at the time knew, the gods control the sea and the gods control the weather. So obviously the reason why we're not able to sail must have something to do with the gods. The seer goes off. He does a few different things to pray to the gods, sort of like checking about bones, looking at birds in the sky. There was a load of different techniques that I'm not that familiar with. And he came back and he said, well, it's bad news. What happened was, when you were out hunting the other day, you shot down that lovely bit of venison. You all had burgers. It was actually a prized deer that belonged to the goddess Artemis. You guys might have heard of Artemis before, goddess of the hunt. And she's furious because it was, one of her special deer. It was like one of her pets, effectively. It's a bit like someone coming onto your land, shooting your dog and then going off and eating it. And she's really angry, so she's decided to organize it so they can't go anywhere. They're trapped on land for a kind of punishment. And she's so angry. The only thing that you can do, Agamemnon, to get the wind picking up again and to sail over to Troy is to sacrifice your daughter, Iphigenia, the eldest daughter. Iphigenia is a great name. If anyone of you've seen... Is it Mrs. Doubtfire? That's what she calls her first name, I think, in it. But the daughter Iphigenia needs to be sacrificed. Taking a quick pause out the story, the gods were, well, obviously, like in the stories, the gods were very picky and a bit fussy, and there was a lot of things to kind of keep them happy, keep them from having a go at you, things you had to do in your day-to-day life. Like one of the things is you needed to have you tended to have a bunch of little statues in your house, which were kind of like your specific household gods that you would pray to. And depending on what kind of maybe job you have or what kind of person you are, you choose different gods. They wanted you to do that. You had to go out and walk to their temples, and the temple could be miles away sometimes, to go and pray to them and offer up songs and things like that. They also got really, obviously from this one, they got very iffy if you eat any food or any animals that happens to belong to them. They don't label them. They never do in the story. So you always find out afterwards that it turned out, oh no, that was Artemis's favorite deer. Much later on in the story, in the story of Odysseus, which goes on even beyond where we're going to go, he gets into a lot of trouble for killing some cows that were sacred to another god. So that's really common. Another thing you had to do to keep the gods happy, don't kill their favorite animals. Another thing is when you're cooking food at the time, if you, while you were cooking it, you had to separate out the lovely juicy meat from the kind of yucky inside entrails bit, like intestines and stuff. And you had to make sure you burnt those intestines and stuff up as a kind of offering to the gods, and they'd be very upset if you didn't do that. You didn't kind of chuck a bunch of intestines in the fire so it burns up and they have a good sniff, kind of open the heavens and breathe out that lovely burnt intestine smell. They also sometimes liked it if you poured a bit of wine onto the ground, and that was sort of saying this one's for the gods. But the final thing that you need to do to keep the gods happy is sacrifice. Usually in sacrifice, it's things like animals and livestock, providing it's not a favorite bit of livestock belonging to the, of that god. But you had to sacrifice an animal, and you have to do it like with a big ceremony and a special knife, and everyone's covered with flowers, and it's all a bit weird. But this time it was so serious that the sacrifice had to be the daughter Iphigenia. So Agamemnon was horrified because it's his daughter, and he puzzled it over, and he talked to all of his kind of generals and Achilles and Odysseus, but they all said, well, we've got to go. Your honor's at stake. Your brother has been, his wife's been stolen. People aren't going to respect you anymore. Also, it's almost like they were trying to convince him it's the will of the gods. You have to go over to Troy. And he ended up changing his mind and go, well, okay, I guess my daughter's got to die. Now, the next important thing for him to do is to get that idea, float it past his wife. Now, I don't know if you can kind of imagine the difficulties of trying to persuade your wife, that eldest daughter, she never does the dishes. Let's just kill her. So what he does is come up with a great plan, which I think is a terrible plan, to lie to her and lie to the daughter. And he announced at the family dinner table, I've decided Iphigenia is going to get married. And not only that, but she's going to get married to the biggest catch around, Achilles, the coolest warrior, pretty much a god himself. Iphigenia is so happy. The mother, the wife of Agamemnon, is called Clytemnestra, so happy. And they go away and they get all dressed up. The mother gets the big hat. They've got the lovely dress that covers up in flowers. And the next day they plan to have the wedding. Everything's going great. Everyone turns up. Achilles is standing at the front. Does the bit at the front look more like, a sacrificial altar than a wedding altar? Maybe. Perhaps Clytemnestra and Iphigenia didn't notice the large ceremonial knife. But ultimately, it got to a point where they got to the end of the aisle and she looked at Achilles. Achilles backed away. A sacrificial knife came out and dead. That was it for Iphigenia. In most versions of the story, there are some versions of the story, which I think are kind of cheat versions, where Artemis changes, that was my dog yawning, changes Iphigenia into a deer at the last minute and spirits her away. But I like to imagine that she dies. So she dies, and immediately the wind changes direction. It picks up again, and everyone cheers, and everyone's happy. Clytemnestra, the mother, the wife of Agamemnon, is furious, absolutely furious, and she storms off home and starts a whole nother story which we're not going to get into. So it's time for us all to go, hop on the boats and head off towards Troy, and that's where our story leaves off. What I'm going to do next is tell you what your tasks are for today. I've got 2 tasks for you. I think they're both fun. So the lesson is about crossing the sea, although we haven't actually crossed the sea yet. Your first task is to write a guide on how to keep the gods happy. Okay, so think about what you need to do to make yourself a positive person in the eyes of the gods, you need to include at least 5 points. I should say points, not point. What I'd like you to do, rather than just say, do this, do that, I want you to try and write them in a kind of, maybe an interesting or engaging or funny way. The kind of way you might find in a social media post or a YouTube video or an article, you know, five reasons you should be doing this or 5 ways to do that. So instead of just saying, the first thing you should do is do this, you might want to say, the first one might come as a shock to you, but a big way to keep the gods happy is, and then explain, this might sound weird, but it's because, so try and write it out and make it sound a bit more interesting. Bonus points if you actually do want to make a YouTube video, if anyone has a channel and wants to do 5 ways to keep the gods happy. So that's your first task. I think it's quite fun, but make sure they're written out. I do not want to see scrappy, kind of rushed sentences like, oh, do this, do that, okay? And your next task is an even more creative one. Obviously, there was a moment before it all went wrong where Achilles and Iphigenia seemed to be getting married. So I would like you to create their wedding invitation. Try and make it as kind of general as possible. But what the challenge is can you put in any references to what's really going to happen? Okay, I was thinking maybe about puns, maybe saying, oh, these two are going to be making a big sacrifice to their alone time, and it's making reference to the fact that she's about to die. Are there any other things you could do? I've included a link here to a website called Canva, where you can actually have a go at making your own invitations in a way that looks a little bit fancier. So let's go for this one. Oh, imagine being called Patty, that's terrible. And you could type in, you know, Achilles and... oh, here's where I get her spelling wrong. Achilles and Iphigenia getting married, but then at the bottom you can maybe put in, you know, they're dying to be wed. Do you understand? Like, so you're just adding in some extra details. Maybe you're going to put in where it's happening. So I told you the town is called Aulis, Aulis. Maybe you could be putting a little bit about how we're going to be treating the gods at the wedding. Is there going to be anything happening? So any kind of bit of creativity you want to put in, that'll be fantastic. So that's your 2 tasks. I think they're pretty easy. Oh, by the way, in order to save this, you kind of got 2 options. I think you can download it, but sometimes it asks you to like sign up, and I'm pretty sure you can just sign up for free. Just put in your Glow email, and it doesn't cost you anything. But if you really don't want to do that, just screenshot it. You can Google how to screenshot, and then just send me the picture. Okay, just upload the picture as a picture to the or copy and paste it into your Word document that you'll have the questions in from the previous task. Okay, so that's the 2 ways of doing it. Perfect. That is all of the stuff I've got for you today, and we'll definitely have 1 more week of this, but right before the end of term, and then hopefully we'll be able to pick up actually in class finishing this story. All right, guys, thank you very much. It's been quite a long, 13 minutes, not too bad. I will see you next week. Goodbye.